Well, welcome to the Amplify Imagination Podcast, where bold voices, big ideas, and boundary pushing conversations come to life straight from the heart of the APSS Convention 2025. I'm Joe Augustin, and our topic for this particular session is what is the real bad news of AI? I have with me three people who are. I think you're usually here to speak about what's great about AI and what's wonderful about the life that's coming ahead. I'll introduce you, and I just have you. First of all, I'm going to take the risk of pronouncing your name as well, and I may get it wrong. So far to my right on your screen, on your left, is Dr. Mark von Rijmenam.
That's perfectly pronounced.
Ah, there you go. I get some money back now. So, in a sentence, what do you normally speak about? What's your area?
Sure. So I'm a strategic futurist, and so I help organizations all around the world understand the future from technology perspective, predominantly artificial intelligence at the moment. I consider myself an optimistic dystopian, which basically means it's a bit of an oxymoron, but it basically means I look at technology from the good, the bad, and the ugly of how it's going to affect our personal lives, our business lives, and society as a whole.
Great. And next to him, we have Chris Wildeboer.
That's perfectly pronounced. I love it.
Yes, I was going to go to the etymology of your name as well and talk about wild boars, but I don't think we have to go there.
It actually doesn't mean wild boar.
Oh, okay.
Let's not go there. We're not going there.
We're not going there right now.
not the
Okay,
right topic.
okay. And what's your topic?
So I am looking at core human connection and how we can thrive in AI for this convention. But my topic that I love to work with my clients is about unlocking their core human connection.
Great. Okay. And right next to me, Dr. Avi Ratnanesan.
Well done.
Yes. And you speak on.
So I generally help founders and CEOs to use neuroscience and AI to accelerate revenue growth, also inspire their teams and build their own leadership, which is often part of their purpose, their potential, but ultimately leading to that sort of growth and acceleration of the impact that they make in their business.
Right. So, I mean, broadly speaking, all very optimistic, very, bright and cheery about the future. And I'm sure, like many of us in the field, you're well into using AI in what you do. And again, I'm in the same field as well. I try to get my kids to be in AI. I've held one of my daughters back from starting university by a year, saying that, you know what, let AI catch up, let the attitudes of AI catch up as well, because it's going to be a great tool. But I think the folks who are coming in here right now have that already under their or in mind. I want to talk today about something which people don't usually talk about, which is the downside of AI, right? And let's go a bit deeper than what people have just normally have shouted out and said. These are the problems. So, having thought about that, each of you, though, what's the biggest thing that comes to mind when you're thinking about the biggest problem or the biggest bad news about AI?
Well, it's certainly not the Terminator that we know roaming the streets. I think we might have caused enough damage already before that when it comes to artificial intelligence. And I think that the main danger at the moment is how these technologies, which are quite powerful, can and will be misused by bad actors. You already see this happening. From phishing went up 1,265% the moment ChatGPT got launched. We see because you're a Nigerian prince that speaks now also 200 languages and knows you better than you know yourself. So it becomes a lot more difficult to understand, is this real or is this fake? And I think that is the main problem, that, understanding what we're dealing with, is that real or fake? That's the challenge. And as a society, I don't think we're ready to understand how to deal with that.
And that's where I get really passionate about understanding the human, because if we can get a little bit more in depth about who we are and look at our own selves and understand where we're being real and fake, it allows us to get a better touch point to reference when we're looking at AI produced things. So I'm really passionate about making sure that people can understand themselves first, and that will absolutely allow us to manage a little bit more of AI. But none of us have been taught to do this.
Right. So I'm just going to get understanding. So, Mark, you're worried about the industrialization of scamming and stuff like that, and yours is more about the authentic person. How do you figure out who's real? Right.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Is that highest on your list right now when you thought about it? I mean, before Mark prompted that.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
It's I immediately thought of a story of a 12-year-old who is using ChatGTP as a best friend.
Mm.
This idea that AI in any form, even as an acknowledgement that it's AI program, is identified as something that you can connect to as a human, and they're going to give you insights and influences in how to function in the human world. I think that is a major concern
Mm.
because it really shows you that that 12-year-old is not able to be comfortable with all of the uncomfortable feelings
Mm.
that they're going through.
Yeah.
And I think that adults do something similar.
Okay, I'm going to go to RV now, because the more you speak, the less he has to work around. So, so what's your answer to that question?
Well, I think there's a few big issues, and not just singular. And we've talked about the cybersecurity breaches. We've talked about that sort of disconnect within humans in the society. There's the big economic impact of job displacement. So I think a lot of speakers are talking about AI use in combination. I talk about that as well.
Yeah.
But I think one of the key things that that's really important to ram home as a message is that there is a very real threat of job displacement, particularly amongst low socioeconomic white collar workers. So if you're an office worker doing a lot of admin stuff, that manual work can be relatively easily replaced by AI over time, and that's going to affect significant number of jobs in one of the nearby countries to Singapore. I'm on a national council there. We know that 600,000 jobs will be lost through AI, right? So it's about how you replace that. I do think also on top of that, that disconnect in workplaces may happen as more and more workers tend to rely on AI and stop talking to their colleagues. So there's a balance that's going to be kind of needs to occur.
Some people might think of it as a good thing.
Some people think of it a good thing. I mean, I'm certainly teaching that in terms of optimizing your workforce, but then you've also got to teach, as Chris talked about, how do you still connect and achieve that human intelligence, right?
Mm.
And then obviously, I do believe whilst Terminator may sort of sensationalize some of this,
Yes.
sentient AI, if we listen to Professor Jeff Hinton, who's one of the godfather of AI, he believes that AI is sentient already. So, there's probably this threat of AI entering databases of, very, very secure organizations, potentially even defense organizations,
Mm.
and maybe influencing or impacting how humans behave and sort of how we may interact even to the point of war moving forward. So I think that is a potential threat that we can't just assume is not going to happen.
Yeah.
If I can just add to that, because I think that's a really interesting point that you mentioned, Dr. Avi, and it's the fact that with these large language models, we have no idea where they come from, and we just believe them at face value, which is like really, really, really problematic. We can be manipulated as we speak within an LLM without ever knowing it, and the fact that big tech is continuously pushing this as the solution to all our problems, I think is really problematic. And you see this also happening. Job displacement, completely agree. I believe 1 billion jobs will be lost by the end of this decade. And big tech is just in the meantime saying, "Oh, we don't have to worry. It's not such a big deal." And of course, I know why they say that, because if everyone knew that 1 billion jobs would be lost, there would be an outrage on the streets. Maybe that would be a good thing. I don't know. But it's so there's some real problems here that are not being addressed by the industry, and I think that's problematic.
Could it be that we approaching AI or the challenge of AI very much the way we approach the environment, right? Because it's something that look, if you ask anyone in the street who will be affected, how many of us will be affected by changes in the environment, almost everyone can tell you everyone's going to be affected. You hear the stories and you say which countries are going to be affected and how badly. People talk about millions and all that kind of stuff, right? Is the problem us in terms of this? Because AI is coming, changes are coming. Is it just the way we are as human beings that we're not we're not accustomed to these kind of ideas.
I wonder whether, when you compare it to the environmental issue, it becomes bigger than an individual feels like that they can handle. So when we go, yeah, the millions are affected by the environment, and yes, millions are affected by AI, but as an individual, we don't feel like we can do anything about it.
Mm.
And I think that's the same in both of those cases. But if we can bring in some critical thinking across these areas, and we can, I optimistically believe that we could educate humans to be more effective in their critical thinking. We can work with these technologies in a
Mm.
really super effective way. It's critical thinking that is a real key here.
Yeah.
It's sort of similar to the movie Don't Look Up. I'm not sure if you've seen that movie, Don't Look Up, which
Yeah.
is a fascinating movie, a bit of a parody. It's very quite funny, and that, but also very sad in the sense that that's how the world works at the moment. In this case, there's an asteroid, but yeah, in the real world, it's climate change, it's AI, and we're not paying attention to it. And I completely agree with you, Chris. The critical thinking. I believe that in the world, there are probably like maybe, I don't know, 10,000 people in the world who have an understanding of what's happening at the moment, and that's extremely problematic because if we don't know what's happening, we don't know what we can do about it. We don't know how to change course. We don't know what kind of decisions we should make. So the fact that we as humanity in general don't know what's happening is really problematic.
Yeah, I think if we look at digitization in general, where AI is this exponential acceleration of digitization of information, right, and human utilization of digital tools, mobiles, laptops, and so on. If we look at what's happened to the human brain, right, over the last 50 years, the gray matter areas of our brain have reduced, right? So dense connections have actually reduced as a result of reliance on digital tools. And now we're going through this more accelerated phase of utilization of AI. And so, how do we continue to use that whilst preserving the use of our brain and critical thinking? Now, for the last sort of 10 years or so, working with leaders and so on, one of the big skills they tell me, Dr. Avi, can you come and help my team with critical thinking? Even before AI, right? But now what's happening is because the ability to actually get outputs from AI for every business question you have, every work question you have so easily, and it's become a cut and paste job, right? It's like I was talking to a CEO. He said, "Yeah, Dr. Avi, I asked my CFO something, and he clearly had cut and pasted, his opinions from ChatGPT into the email and sent it to me as a potential answer." And the CEO said, "Hey, you can't just cut and paste something, and you're the CFO. You've got to think about the answer as to how we're actually going to improve and optimize the finance of the business, and not just cut and paste something, right?" So people are losing that ability to think critically, even people in very senior positions. And so we're getting to this very nuanced phase of what we call trust governance. And so how do you actually trust the information that comes out of these tools, but also how do you mistrust that and analyze that? And that's going to be a very big skill moving forward.
But what do you say about people who say, like right now we have all kinds of libraries that you can, in AI you have libraries you can use, and I talk to people who create private libraries, right, based on their own ideas. Some of them are coded to address some of these problems. Actually, so you can have a high ethics. You can have a high ethics AI. You can have you can have an anxious AI if you want to as well. Um, you talked about this reduction of the gray matter. I was actually quite curious to see about that, whether or not it's something that is just purely about what's happening right now, or has it always been happening already? I mean, aren't we? We're entering an age of specialization, right? So no one knows how to make a pencil, right? That's basically it. We can't make things from basics and from the basic part anymore because we've moved on beyond that. What about the idea that, well, you know what, this is evolution. It is just the next phase of what we're going to do. We lost our fur. Maybe we can lose some areas of our critical thinking.
Well,
I've made Chris very uncomfortable.
yeah. Well, I am with you because I do believe that the process where we're going through is just the next step in evolution, where we, a next step in evolution is that we, at some point, intelligence creates artificial intelligence. Because if we think that humanity is the pinnacle of intelligence, I think that's a very arrogant perspective. So we need to think that intelligence, there is no upper limit to intelligence. So intelligence can be a gazillion times more intelligent than we human beings are. So, and that's where I think we're going, and I think it's part of evolution. But I'm very curious to hear your perspective, Chris.
Bring it, Chris, bring it.
I understand that it is part of evolution, but one of the concerns I have is that often we don't know where AI is actually influencing us. So we know the obvious ones, ChatGPT, those sorts of things, we can pick up the app, but there are other versions of AI that are influencing us on a more unconscious level and have been for 20 years, that we are already evolved into it. It's just now, how do we handle it? I don't think it's evolving into it. We've already got there. And now it's the evolution of managing it and managing ourselves within it. Evolution is always going to be there. We're always going to move forward. And forward isn't always the best, but it's always moving. So we're going to take some wrong steps, and then we're going to have to backtrack and do it again. And that's going to go on for a little while. And I think we're in a little bit of yes, we're pushing forward, but there's going to be a bit of a retreat. And sometimes that retreat is necessary, not because it feels good, but it has to, so that we can reset and go, okay, now we're going to take this section forward, not that other one.
This is concern about how we lose some of the humanness or the things that make us us, right? I mean, that's totally legit. But I want to reframe this a little bit. Like, we're upset at the idea that a 12-year-old has a digital friend, right? But we liked in our time as well. We got into a new way of doing things. We stopped going to the library because we didn't need to use that at the library, or we found ways to find things faster. We now know a lot more about medicine than we used to. I mean, you can self-diagnose and make yourself ill at the same time.
Every time.
Yeah. So, I mean, how much of this is actually also, again, back to this whole thing, that the biggest problem could be us? Because, are we becoming, like, having been through the cycle of learning and education and now speaking and thought leadership, are we in a position where we're going like, oh, young people's music, because there's certain ways of thinking that we've worked very hard to get to this. Someone's come up with a shortcut.
I think if we come back to that previous question about evolution, right, which is the macro piece, and then bring it back to the individual, okay? Because and I really like this conversation, because if we take this sort of Darwinian view of evolution being survival of the fittest, okay, who's going to be the fittest in the next 10, 20, 30 years? Is it people who are hiding from AI in the cave, or people who are using AI at a high degree of competence and in a balanced human way as well, right? I think, and I have a friend who's also a neuroscientist, and he's the let's go hide in the cave guy. Okay, he literally lives in caves from time to time, but he's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's this whole notion that, look, if all the good actors, and this is a very subjective view in the world, that care about humanity, care for others, go hide in the cave, then we're just left with bad actors dominating AI. That, I think, is the biggest fear. Because the problem is us, is just that us isn't just one person. It's just many, many people with many, many kinds of values, with different levels of greed, empathy, care, and so on. And we've got to kind of figure out how we balance that and not sort of decommission ourselves to being sort of hidden humans away from AI. I think it's really important that the good actors also get into the game, but know how to do this, let's call it the right way, right? In order to evolve accordingly. Otherwise, we're starting to see very, very significant income disparity in countries right now.
Yeah.
Right? Between the richest and the poorest. In fact, some would say that even the most modern economies have got oligarchs, some of them being the tech titans. right? So we can't stay in this hidden sort of agenda. Yes, it could be revolution in time to come, but I think it'd be better if we can be proactive actors in that space. I'm keen to hear what the others think. Yeah.
Well, I just want to go back to you to Darwinism. You know, he didn't really specify survival of the fittest, but he said who's most adaptable to change.
Yeah, it's implied, right?
Yeah. But that's I think is really important right now because are we able to adapt to the changes that are coming? But are we able to adapt with a long-term perspective in mind of where we want to go? And I completely agree with you. You know that we. If the strongest and the most powerful get their way of how they should evolve, I think we're in for a tough ride. But if we get a more balanced, interconnected perspective, then we have a better chance as humanity to cross the chasm, so to say, of the disruption that is coming our way. And I do believe that once we've crossed the chasm, there will be abundance, but there's no guarantee we'll manage to cross it. And we need as a species, we need as a humans, and I agree, it is us. Us is the problem, not technology. Technology is neutral. So it's us is the problem. We need to learn to adapt. We need to learn to adapt in a way that is beneficial for all stakeholders, for everyone, not only humans, also planet Earth, also other organisms that live on this beautiful planet. We need to learn to adapt with everything in mind.
And I want to extend on that. There's we often think in a very short-term view of what we're achieving. So in the next 20 years, in the next 50 years. But if we looked further generational and went 7 generations, what does that look like? Who's asking those questions? And where are those, where's that evolution? Because that's what we need to be paying attention to now, is what is it for 7 generations' time? And it's very rare that we think in that way.
Well, I'm glad you see short term as 20 to 50 years. Most people think short term at the next quarterly shareholder meeting. So I'm glad that short term in your perspective is 20 to 50 years. So that's good.
Well, Darwinism, I think, is survival of the luckiest. It really is. I mean, we talk about, if you say who is adapted to this, no one's doing anything to survive. Everyone just survives because the circumstances don't kill them, right? If you think about that, I mean, dinosaurs were well adapted to rule the world. An asteroid came and killed them, right? So that to me is I have this thing about how we're not now the fittest or strongest we've ever been. Actually, what's happened is intelligence has created a weaker human race. Those who would have been eliminated by the selection process have been spared, right? Because now and then you have the rise of other things as well. The other concern I have actually is there something happening there where AI actually is exposing our incompetency, right? Because I mean, how many times have you look amongst us? I'm sure, right? You've gone like, oh, now I don't need to hire that person anymore, right? Because instantly you can go like, this is better than that person, right? So in that area, what do you guys think about this?
Well, I think in that whole space of task intelligence, competence, skill development, there's a whole gradient and spectrum of how you develop that over time. And incompetence means a very big word, but I think the piece that you're talking about is, can we do things more efficiently, improve experiences, improve sort of customer service through machines than through humans, right? And that's the big opportunity. But that's also the big risk. Now, I think Bill Gates sort of came out with a quote that said by 2030 or 2035, we'll have a 2-day working week. Okay? Because AI will be so efficient and do so many of our tasks that will be unnecessary for humans to work 5 days a week, which I think is a very, very interesting concept, because a lot of us, when we come back to your question earlier about we do things to survive, I think a lot of people work 5 days a week in order to survive. So we can pay the bills, so we can actually feed our families and ourselves, right? But if the world became so efficient and there was greater symmetry of resources and the poor could get what they needed and the rich, and would we all really need to work 5 days a week? And then the question becomes, what would we do with the other 3 days? right? If we're only working 2 days a week and we get paid and we get fed and all those things, I think there's this real opportunity for humanity to kind of reconnect with purpose. Because a lot of people, I know a lot of people in workplaces are there because they have to be, not because they want to be. But their true gifts could probably be expressed by doing something else. And there are societies and countries, and particularly in the Nordic states, where more of that is allowed,
Yeah.
and there's greater satisfaction, greater gross national happiness,
Yeah.
as opposed to gross domestic product, that could be an aspirational goal out of all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But getting there is going to be the challenge. I completely agree. If we get there,
100%.
then we'll be fine.
It's going to be a choice.
But getting there is the challenge, because yes, for a lot of people they work because they need to, but work also still gives them purpose. So now, if all of a sudden AI will take away your job and there's no safety net, sort of a universal basic income or a robot tax or whatsoever, then you're properly screwed. Pardon my French. So Singapore is doing quite well. Singapore said, well, anyone over 40 years old gets 90% grant for retraining themselves. Brilliant. But that's only one country of all the countries in the world who is doing something. All the other countries are not doing anything, and I think that's really problematic, because yes, AI will take over a lot of the jobs. I do believe that machines and humans need to work together for the optimal outcome. But a lot of organizations, because we live in a capitalist society, will just go ahead and implement automation, being AI and robotics, into their organization, leaving a lot of people left behind. And we see already clear examples of the first signals are already indicating to a future where a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. So unless we have systems in place in our societies that will do something for those people, which again most countries don't, and then we only once we have that, we are able to help them if you lose your job.
Okay, so let's have the really uncomfortable conversation. Chris has already been wriggling through the whole time.
I give myself away every time.
We have lots of expected outcomes, as in like these jobs you talked about that are going to be gone. We have high expectations of those things. What are the worst things that can happen right now which we're not expecting? So in terms of jobs, who's going to lose their job? Yeah, we understand that the menial tasks in administration, those are probably going to go away, right? But who's not expecting it to come for them that you think?
CEO.
The CEO? Yeah. Okay. Speak a little bit more about
I think the leadership is, again, you already see the first signals that some organizations are experimenting with an AI CEO. Is that good or is it bad? I leave it in the middle, but people are experimenting with this, so the signals are coming. So the signals are there, and change is coming. I think a lot of the leadership team thinks, well, I'll be safe, but as a CEO, you are highly biased. You are biased by if you are a woman or a man. You're biased by your upbringing. You're biased by your career. You're biased by etc. If we manage to build AI correctly, it is supposedly unbiased and therefore much better at making decisions. There's a few big ifs here. So I think a lot of people don't think that AI will come for the job. The taxi drivers probably can see it coming. The truck driver can see it coming. Call center agents already see it coming. So there are clear examples, but I think leadership is one where we think we're safe, but we're not.
One of the industries that I see as currently unaffected by AI, and yet, so this could be a surprise industry, is the vet industry. Because it is very still reliant on human contact, medical experience of previous animals, and that experience and knowledge being passed down from vet to vet and through the vet nurses and vet technology and that stuff. And so there is a bit of vet technology, but it's one of those industries that's still very hands-on, and I don't think that they realise that it's coming, and there's more animals being brought in and as pets and that kind of thing. So it's an industry that's increasing, and yet hasn't really been touched by AI. So I'm a bit concerned for that industry.
So many aspects to this. I think to Chris's point and Mark's point, the jobs that are more relational are going to be preserved for longer, right? So high ticket selling, enterprise selling, for example, still requires a lot of human to human interaction, and that relationship based sort of services are probably going to sort of have a lag period before they're completely disrupted by AI. That's for sure. But also when we think about the CEOs, actually, we're doing some of that work around the AI CEOs, but we see that as a spectrum, right? So you can go about building those complex algorithms around CEO decision making. The number of decisions that CEOs have to make generally are across multiple functions. So you could replace a sales rep relatively easily, but a CEO an ideal CEO has to be good at sales, marketing, finance, HR, and all those, right? So to actually balance the variables across all those functions takes quite a bit of time to build. So we're going on the path of CEO advisor first,
Yeah.
then co-CEO, then potentially full CEO AI.
Yeah.
Right.
What time frame do you think that's going to happen?
So if you look at OpenAI's 5-stage classifications, we're at sort of, let's say, stage 3 right now, reasoning, and stage 5. So then there's sort of innovators, and then the stage 5 is AI CEOs and AI organizations. Now, you might think that's 5 to 10 years away, but even OpenAI says it's probably about 3 years away, right? So looking at 2028, right? Something like that. That is, what sort of OpenAI classifier. We kind of knew it's coming, but they literally put staging against that. It might be sooner, it might be later. Might have already happened.
True. No, I think to your point earlier, it's the human connection. I think is really important, and I think the human connection will demand a premium. So let's say if you're in retail, if you are you're buying something from I don't know the Chinese, what's the Chinese clothing shop, the cheap clothing, you will never speak to a human ever, and it will all go through AI. If you want to speak to customer service, it's all AI. But if you buy a Louis Vuitton bag, for example, you will definitely speak to a human because you pay a premium. Is this good? I don't think so, because it's another separation in society where if you are rich, you can speak to humans. If you're poor, you speak to AI. But that's, I think, where it will happen. Yeah, since we are at a speakers conference, I think our speakers will be safe for a long time, because I don't think a humanoid will replace us on stage anytime soon. But again, it's that premium that comes into play, and yeah, that's something we have to deal with as society.
Well, I mean, this also could be a case of us being blind to our situation, right? I mean, like the CEO feeling that he's going to be replaced by AI, that doesn't happen very easily, because you can it's not that easy to replace me. And I've actually been experimenting with an AI CEO co-founder, right? So it's there to work with me. Another area which I found very surprising, I spoke to someone who is in the area of psychology. Now, you think psychology, therapists, there's no way AI is going to be replacing that, right? Now,
It's coming.
oh, it's come. It's come to the point right now where the scores of therapy received and delivered by AI, again, actually does better than humans, right? But there is one key thing, though. It's without the knowledge of the person on the other side. They don't know they're talking to an AI, and AI scores better.
But sometimes it doesn't matter. When I did my PhD in Sydney, say 9 years ago, I did a part of my research was on chatbots, and this was the 2016 era, where Tay from Microsoft, screwed the Microsoft brand in 24 hours, and it's. My research showed back then that people are much easier to talk to a chatbot. In this case, it was about services and products and canceling products and etc. To talk to an AI, they're much more comfortable to talk to an AI to do that than to talk to a human, because they know that the human might convince them to stay. So I think the same is happening with the therapist. If they know they're talking to an AI, they are often more willing to share their problems and their issues and they're dealing with, because they are talking to an AI, and they know that they're talking to an AI, but sometimes that is good enough for them. So it's again, there's a balance, but there's a good side and a bad side to this with everything we're talking about. But it's, for a lot of people, having an AI therapist can be good enough, and then it's a brilliant solution for them, that because of all the long waiting lists that we have around the world for human therapies, which again will demand a premium in the future, it might be good enough.
Yeah. The speakers who are supposedly to be left alone in this whole process, right? So I think there's a real difference that's happening right now. As in, like, I think with delivery vessels for AI in a great sense, right? I mean, a lot of the stuff that I hear about is stuff that I can go, yeah, I can find out about that. And if you have a better way to ask a question, you can get a better insight. So, in a sense, many of us are in that role where we're kind of delivering. It used to be we talk about the Google speaker. Now I think it's the Chat GPT speaker. Um, go deeper. Let's talk about speakers that will be replaced. I mean, I don't think every speaker is immune to this.
So Mark and I did an experiment a few months ago on this, right? And so what we did, we both have clones, digital twins of ourselves, and we were pioneering. I think Mark was first in world, I was first in region to develop the business coach clone, and sort of we had our clones speaking to each other over a coffee cup, right? So we just put them, as opposed to humans, we had our clones doing that conversation, and they went at it for a good 9 minutes, right? Talking to each other, giving answers to questions, questioning each other, and so on. We were just there watching and just being.
We had to stop them.
We had to stop them,
Right.
right? Because they kept going. Now, I'd say the first 3 or 4 minutes were actually, wow, like this is really interesting. And then they kind of went deep, and then it kind of went into this loop and got a bit boring. But the reality is that it is possible to like have a full panel discussion with AI, and this was what 6 months ago, right? With older models or something to that effect, right? So I'm a little bit different and saying, look, I think the thing is right now we are still paying a premium for humans coming and being present in front of us,
Yeah.
right? But if you had an AI speaker, let's say Elon Musk was really tired one day, and he just said, just send my AI to do that interview, and we didn't know about it, we probably still would have paid for it.
You know,
Right?
Elon's a low bar in terms of a human thing.
Well, but the reality is that it's already happening, right? People are already using their clones
Yeah.
to communicate their content, right? 100 and reaching 100 times more people than the human can.
Yeah.
Right. So I think people are paying, but it's not in the same way of getting a speaker fee. They might be paying in different ways of consumption. You know, but that doesn't mean that all speakers that are human are going to lose complete value. But hey, we are seeing markets declining in terms of speaker fees. So what's going on there? Yeah.
And I'm hearing all of this and listening to it. And it comes down to we've got to change our definition of what we know a CEO is, what we know a speaker to be, what we know a therapist to be.
Yeah.
And by changing the definition, we'll be able to adapt to the change much easier. It's up to us, it's our responsibility as an individual speaker to make sure that we adjust to those changes. I hear as a speaker and as I think this, I go, oh, wow, this is the protective part of the human nature that kicks in and goes, yeah, but nobody knows the story that I experienced yesterday that I can share when I go to speak. And yet that is going to come because we'll have some technology that we're wearing that day that will know that story as well. So the point to that is that the things that we hold dear and of value right now today as a speaker, our personal stories, that's what connects us to our audience. That's going to be coming through in a different way as well. We don't have the full picture yet of how that's going to come through. So at the moment, we're just relying on what we know and doing a bit of self-preservation.
So I've always said that art is going to be what takes us out of it, right? Everybody, you know, all big, huge problems need a bit of art to take us through. AI, I think, is in a similar place as well, because all these things we talk about, like how we feel, the premium, and all that kind of stuff, that ceases to be a thing if it's invisible, right? I mean, if you think about it right now, like even with people, you meet people who are not who they really are, right? They're behaving something. They're running kind of an algorithm. They're thinking about how do I do this. They've learned something about ingratiating, and whatever. And they go like, oh, if I just do this and I keep going that. And I met a lot of people like that who've been very effective doing that, right? So AI is going to be in that realm as well. And this thing about being able to decide if someone is real, That's different as well because now it's getting better and better. Occasional glitches can be put down to bad connections. I mean, those are things as well. Are we going to be fooled by art? Is art going to be is a non-benevolent artist going to be the one who? And I want to say take us down as well, right? Because I think what we're doing is we're equating the idea that we were had as a bad thing. You know, is there value in that? Is there are you can we come to the point where we go like, yeah, I was fooled, but that was kind of fun, like a good magician.
But I think this is very much a philosophical discussion, then, because what defines art, is a large language model that is capable of processing billions and trillions of tokens in a second, is that not art? I would almost argue it is. Is Rembrandt or Van Gogh in proper Dutch, painting a painting because he has seen something during the day from another artist, and then incorporating aspects of that in his painting? Is that art, or is that fraud, or is that copyright breach, or whatever? So there's this very big gray area when it comes to what is art, and I think it does require us to rethink the definition of what constitutes art. And if you have an artist, a painter, who develops an algorithm that paints with the painter, or even paints on behalf of the painter, is that not art? It's I think we need to, before dismissing that all AI can't be art, I think we need to first have a proper discussion of what is art.
Yeah, no, I'm actually for the idea. I believe that AI creates art because art doesn't fully exist in the art of creation itself. It's in the art of interpretation. So where it lands, art becomes art. Without the audience, there is no art, right? So we are that interpretive. The human being is the interpretation of things, right? So we create art when it lands on us. Before it gets to us, it's someone's attempt to do something, and when that moment hits together, then art happens. What I'm saying actually is that if there's someone coming along to make it so that their work is to fool. Like for me, what I do with the work I do is I work very hard to make people capable of telling better lies. Now, it sounds like a terrible thing, but if you speak the truth but in an untruthful way, you are not going to get through to the audience as well. So there are a lot of people who speak the truth, don't do it well, they can't make it work. I'm just thinking about where we're heading, because the end game for AI must be, in terms of interpersonal connections, must be the replacement of the human experience, right? Is that I'm sure that's when they win.
I'm not sure that it's going to be a replacement of the human experience, and maybe that's my self-preservation kicking in again. But I don't think humans can survive just on AI. I don't think that that's a thing. We are still going to have to contribute in some way. So the premise you're questioning there is that how much of AI takes over and the humans just become not a contribution, but we will always be a contribution.
We hope.
Yeah. Well, I think the I wanted to talk about the art piece, but we'll come to this piece. It's much bigger. But I think coming back to sentient AI, and AI that's become truly self-intelligent, self-aware, which they also call ASI. So we'll move through artificial general intelligence, then artificial superintelligence, which is effectively it can do everything that every human can do. Now, will that be a good AI or a bad AI? Is the question, right? And the good AI being, will that be an AI that's friendly to humans and continues to see humans as part of the sustainable picture of progress, or will it be a bad AI, which is let's just wipe out and destroy humans because
Terminator.
because they're drawing and consuming resources, and the net contribution to itself and the planet is a deficit, right? So and ultimately, if we think about it, right, and I truly believe this, because behind all this technology is still humans. We are still the ones creating it. We are still the ones modifying it. Yes, there's a sort of self-learning going on, but the safeguards put in place into the technology was initially done by the humans. So I believe good actors will lead more towards creating the good AI. Okay, and bad actors will probably lean towards more creating the bad AI, right?
Whether intentionally or unintentionally.
Correct. And there's this whole law of unintended consequences of all this. But that will probably determine what the future looks like. I don't think there's going to be one AI that controls everything, because it never has been. And all technology tends to ultimately mimic some form of human politics and behavior. So that's I think what's going to determine what the future looks like, to be honest.
You know, the critical word in that whole answer of yours was safeguards.
Yeah.
Right? You said safeguards built into it, and I think, despite our best intentions, as Mark was nodding to earlier, is that things happen that are unexpected. I mean, you know, Microsoft launched their chatbot way back when, not with the intention that you become a Nazi, and almost immediately did. Um, AI wants to win. It's designed to win. It's like the human spirit. We are designed to win. We want to win, and we figure things out, right? So, even with safeguards, we're seeing AI begin to cheat. Like earlier on, one of our speakers was talking about that as well. We've run over time, but I'm just going to hold you back for your last 15-second spurt at this. What's one thing we really have to think about? What do we have to keep on the top of our minds to make sure that any of this bad stuff, I mean, some of it's going to happen, but what's one thing that we all have to try and do that you think?
Well, I think we need to educate ourselves, and fast, like really fast. And in order to understand what's happening, what's going on, so we can ask better decisions. So we need to be to see obtain a different perspective on the world, to understand how these technologies affect our lives. And we should not be ignorant about this. Say, well, it's not going to happen in my lifetime, so I can't be bothered. And this applies to individuals, organizations, governments, intra-government organizations. We need to step up, and we need to understand what's happening and what's going on, where this is going, so that we can influence it in a way that benefits humanity as a whole.
Chris?
I would say we have to be deliberately conscious, which is pretty much everything Mark just said, but deliberately conscious. And that applies to all of those areas, just deliberately conscious.
Avi?
Yeah, I think the success or failure of humankind to a large degree has been determined on whether the mind and the brain has determined I have control or I don't have control. And if we feel that we are powerless and we don't have control in this game, we are very likely to lose, both as an individual and as a human race. But if we feel that we want to self-empower ourselves, learn, adapt, continue to connect with humans, but then bring that into our utilization of AI tools, then we have a much better chance of creating a better future for ourselves and the planet.
Yeah. Well, so I'm still hearing, though, generally, we're still optimistic about AI. We're just concerned parents. I'm actually thinking about how AI, I'm thinking about the consciousness and the great AI of the future. I'm just really hoping that somehow they're vegan. Anyway, thanks for joining us for this episode of Amplify Imagination Podcast, where ideas ignite, voices rise, and the future gets a little louder. Keep daring, keep dreaming, and above all, keep amplifying. Mark, Chris, Avi, thank you so much for spending your time with us, and thank you for having us on as well.